It is season 3 of the Camp Owners Podcast, and Howie and I are back in the saddle. A little rough to get back in that saddle after the summer, but we are ready and we feel like there are so many great topics for us to explore. So in this episode, Howie and I reconnect about how pre-summer was, how summer was, reflecting on some things that we learned and looking ahead to what our topics will be. So we hope you enjoy a little recap of summer 2021 with Howie and I and looking ahead to 2022.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast, a space for camp owners to talk about the unique aspects of camp ownership and get inspired by each other. We are going to sit down with camp industry experts, leaders, and fellow camp owners to hear how the camp dream transpired for them, learn from each other, and discuss some of the biggest issues in the private camp industry. Hello, friends. It's great to be back. My name is Howie Grossinger, and I am the co-owner of Camp Robin Hood, a day camp in the suburbs of Toronto.
Hello, everyone. I am Kelly Schuna, co-owner and director of Hidden Pines Ranch Day Camp in Stillwater, Minnesota. If you're looking to find and subscribe to the Camp Owners Podcast, you can either find us online at gocamp.pro/ownerspod or by searching for us in your favorite podcast app. Finally, if you're listening to this and think it'd be useful to other camp owners or aspiring camp owners in your circle, please feel free to send them a note to listen.
You know, Kelly, it is season 3. I cannot believe it. It is so great to see you and hear your voice, and really excited to get this season started. But before we do, we've got to do some camp business like we always do, and to thank our sponsor. We have 2 sponsors this season, and we're really happy to have our friends at Camp Brain back for our 3rd season of sponsorship. And just want to give them a huge shout out. Camp Brain is camp management software, been around since 1994 and serves over 1,300 camps with core modules in camper, conference center, fundraising, which we'll tell you a lot more about over the course of the season, medical, camp store, and attendance for day camps. Camp Brain has a robust, that's a good word to start the season with, robust, a robust feature to set to meet all of your camp's needs. I have to tell you, Kelly, being back at camp in 2021, my team got refamiliar with all of the wonderful aspects of Camp Brain to just pick up where we left off from 2019. So having Camp Brain in your corner is really value added, especially we found our camps as we return to camp life. Our office staff, our administration, everything ran so smoothly, knowing not only did we have this amazing software, but we had the team at Camp Brain available to us if we just couldn't remember something we used to do regularly, and it's been a couple of years. So they were amazing. If you want to learn more about Camp Brain, you got to check them out at campbrain.com or give them a call at 866-485-8885. All right.
All right. Back in the saddle is how we titled this episode, Howie. So we haven't been in our podcasting saddles since May, which it feels like no time has changed seeing you again and talking to you, but also so much has happened since we last were recording together.
I know. It does feel like so much has gone on. And I know that you and I have stayed in touch over the course of the summer, and we're able to check in with one another on how things went. And I'm sure for many of us in the industry, as much as we had our nose to the grindstone to take care of, for many of us, a return to camp, I would imagine that we continued to rely on trusted colleagues to help us navigate some of the real stuff that we faced in 2021. Kelly, you and I for this season are going to collect a lot of really great topics to help our private camp operators wrap their head around all kinds of things that might be on their mind coming out of 2021 and in planning for 2022 and beyond. But I thought, and I think we felt that this episode would just be an opportunity for us to share our own experiences and maybe, get our audience thinking about perhaps some topics that they may want to share with us for future episodes. So I'm really excited to jump in and talk about, some of the stuff that we both faced, and I'm sure many people faced over the course of the summer.
I, as you are, have been participating in the Go Camp Pro COVID Survivor Boot Camp, which Survivor, yes, that's how I feel. But it was so interesting to me to hear Joanna Smith Warren talk about uh, being a little bit out of shape. Like, I think that to me really resonated with me, was thinking about, man, were some of the things that were hard and just the summer in general, because our camp muscles were a little out of shape after, at least for you and I, for 2 years. And so I think this will be really interesting for us to talk about what was the lead up to the summer like? How was our summers? How were our summers? And what are the things that we're reflecting on now? Because this is that beautiful time of being able to reflect back and think about how it went and what it looks like going forward. And then, as you mentioned, what are those topics that are really standing out to us about the next few months as we prepare for 2022, which seems crazy to think about. But it's time. Ooh, I'm not ready, but it's time. It really is time. So I am excited to connect with you and kind of look ahead to what this year will be like for us with our podcast.
Yeah, I couldn't help but sort of reflect over the course of the summer as things were coming up. I'm really proud of our season last year where, we addressed a lot of important camp topics, but also some very real COVID preparation topics. And I found myself, feeling really good about some of the topics we got to address as hosts of this podcast, and some of the great experts we brought on board. I felt, for me, they really helped me frame a lot of the approaches and the things that we ended up doing. Having said that, I couldn't agree more with your reference to camp stamina. It is really something that I know for myself, I take for granted. The preparation of leading up to the summer builds our muscles physically and mentally to cope with a full day of day camp. And in many cases, for our friends who, are up at overnight camp throughout the summer, those long days where, we have to find, if we can find time for ourselves, but also be there for our staff and our campers and our clients. And, everything was ratcheted up to the next level in terms of not knowing what we would face and hoping that everything we put in place allowed us to, deal with whatever came our way. And I look forward to reconnecting with friends in the industry to get their thoughts as well. I know that on the Day Camp Pod, they had a wonderful episode recently where there was a lot of good reflection by the team there. And obviously the boot camp, which you mentioned, which I'm also, a part of. It's really nice to start thinking about the survival we experienced and how we can continue to survive as an industry and as private camp owners. So yeah, so much to talk about. And I hope that some of the things we talk about today resonates with the audience.
Well, this is that magical time where if we capitalize on that time to reflect, and for me, it's one of the things I always push off. I have a great saying all summer, like in the fall, and even in May. Actually, who am I kidding? It usually starts probably April of the things I'm going to do in the fall that I have pushed off. So now it's time to really, what am I going to do in this off season, and what am I going to focus on? So let's go back though, Howie. Let's talk about, since we stopped recording, let's talk about your lead up to camp. So tell us a little bit just about what May and June were like for you.
Well, for the entire industry where I'm at in Ontario, there was still so much uncertainty with the hope that vaccine rollout in the province and the support of the government would allow us to receive health guidance in a timely fashion. And kudos to all the members of the task force up here in the OCA who, in many ways, overnight camps got the guidance at the 11th hour. But with all the great discussion the industry had, the association had, I think that, camps across the board were ready to start, whenever we were allowed to. And thankfully, given, as we all experience in whatever state you're in or province you may be in, or part of the world you may be in, every jurisdiction had different approaches to reopening. And thankfully for overnight camps, that reopening for overnight camps could take place, at the typical time. Most overnight camps got to start on time. As for the day camps, we were right up until the end of staff training, having discussions with public health about, in a day camp setting, outdoor day camps, would kids be required to still wear masks in their cohort? And in my case, up until the last day of staff training, with 3 days left to go to the start of camp, our community was prepared for all kids in camp in masks, outdoors. And we were like, come on. But thankfully, literally in the last few hours of that staff training, we got word from the Ministry of Health that while the camp staff needed to wear masks in their cohorts with their campers outdoors were allowed to not wear their masks. And boy, oh boy, that really got us off to a great start. And I think it just set the tone for the summer with all of its challenges. But, Kelly, not unlike yourself, I'm sure, we had to totally, in Adam Grant fashion, as I've mentioned in the past, we had to rethink staff training. We had to rethink the way we engage parents who didn't have typical open houses, at least in our area, they didn't. How do we get them and their kids familiar? So there were a lot of things that we put into place, but we'll get back to reflections in a moment. But obviously it was, and I just have to say, and I don't know if our listeners can identify with this, Kelly, but we literally were ready to give back deposits like 2 days before camp if they changed their mind. Like, we just wanted to send a very healthy message of, we want to make this as easy as possible. If you've got a change of heart at the last minute, we're going to make it work for you. We had families pulling out in June, and then I guess when they heard camp was a go, or maybe their neighbors were coming, they re-registered like 24 hours later. Like, we had all of that at day camp, which was really interesting. And I know for overnight camp, at least the overnight camp I'm associated with at Camp Walden, like, there were all kinds of things going on about the uncertainty, but we definitely fired up the Zoom in June for sure.
Yeah, I probably am doing this in the reverse order, but I did just get Adam Grant's book, Think Again, which I probably should have read in the spring, but that's okay. Because the word that resonates the most with me that you said, Howie, was rethink. We rethought everything. And I think that was challenging and so much growth, really hard growth. It was painful, really, really painful growth in many ways, but you're right. We did virtual training. We trained our staff every Monday in May. We had to rethink training. We had to rethink open house. Like you said, it was a drive-through open house. They didn't get out of the cars. We had to rethink our staff training. Okay, everything outside. So how are we going to do these sessions outside, not in the gym, with our PowerPoint? And so it was, rethinking how we organize activities in the afternoon, who mixes together. It just was a lot of rethinking, which, is good. I think camps, we get into a groove and you have your systems. And so it's always good to rethink how we do things. But this year particularly felt like we turned camp on its head. Like, we rethought everything, and everything was different. It felt like it was the same, but it was different. So that would be my theme for May and leading into camp, was rethinking everything, and kind of last minute rethinking, because you didn't know, like you mentioned, it felt like, what will that guidance be? Will it change? Will it be the same? So you wanted to make plans, but you really didn't, because you didn't want them to change. again. But yep, lots of rethinking, I think, would be my reflection on
Yeah.
pre-camp for sure.
And it became very clear to us as well that the 2021 pandemic was very different than the 2020 pandemic, and really two chapters of it, and particularly in the operation of camp. And I've heard so many people talk about, who had the opportunity to run in 2020. We also saw a side, I would imagine, and I think if we're experiencing it, I would imagine many others are too, is, I would say the vast majority of parents were incredibly appreciative and eager to get their kids off screens and get them outdoors. But, we definitely saw, and we'll talk more about this when we talk about specifics of the summer, but, parents being so tethered to their kids for so many months, I think had so much anxiety with parents where, the ones that were tough on us were about as tough as I can remember, if I'm being honest. And I don't know if that's your experience, but I think they were so used to being with their kids. And I think this goes for overnight and day. Although I think for day camp specifically, seeing the kids every day and then questioning them, how was your day? Did they do this? Did they make you wear your mask? Did they do, it was just very different. I know at overnight camp when we were waving, when the parents were dropping their kids off at our overnight camp, we had such an amazing system, as I'm sure many of us did, where, the long goodbyes that normally happen at overnight camp at the buses, it was like we were on a system. We had to get X number of cars in and out, drop off your kid. So I think in some ways it was like, for some parents, it was like hard, but easy. It kind of made the aftermath easy. So I just think, we could do a whole episode, I think, on dealing with clients and dealing with parents in the 2021 summer and what we learned about, that and moving forward. But, I just feel like so many aspects of camp were seen through a brand new lens. That was really, really, really interesting. And I look forward to having some of our overnight camp friends on to talk a little bit about maybe some of the things they experienced, which is really interesting. Not to even mention the health and safety stuff that we all had to put in place. How day camps had to treat testing and all those things in a very different way than our friends at overnight camp, who may have done on-site testing regularly and beef up their health center. So those things are definitely things we can explore for sure.
Yeah, your comment about the parents definitely resonates with me for sure. Because Joanna mentioned that too, about the disgruntled parents.
Yeah.
And I would say I did not have as many comments from parents and negative feedback and unhappy. I think, like you said, they were just really happy to be at camp. But the ones that I did have it was intense. It
Yeah.
felt like, let's be real. I had a mom ask if my camp was like Lord of the Flies because her daughter got a scrape on the water slide and she didn't think anyone paid attention to it. We could go on, but when I talked with her the next day, she was so intense and felt like so much fear. And just having that separation from her child, which she had been with her child so much, and she was so emotional. So it almost felt like I just needed to just really, those strokes, like, it's okay. I don't know. It was really interesting to me. It was way different than parent interactions I think I've had in the past. It just felt like I asked her, then I'm like, do you need a hug? And she's like, yes. I'm like, okay. Even though you just called my camp Lord of the Flies, I am going to hug you and love you up because I think that's what you need right now. But it felt to me just everyone was really tender, and just needed lots of love compared to how it was in the past.
Yeah. I totally, totally know what you mean, Kelly. I think about something that a friend shared with me. The author Michael Thompson uses or coined a term or used a term, normal social pain. And I found that we had, at least at the beginning of this summer, this group of campers, and it wasn't widespread, but parents just being very resistant to their kids actually experiencing normal social pain, given the fact that many of them did not weren't in team environments or didn't have to experience group dynamics. And, camp, as we know, is such a wonderful place for us to experience normal social pain. It's actually the place to experience normal social pain. But parents were so, in some cases, and I don't know if our listeners would agree with this, but I know that we had a few experiences where there was such catastrophizing of just like normal stuff that in any other summer people wouldn't make a big deal about, like, playing soccer, and you get pushed down is now, I swear this happened. Sari, my wife, a parent told her that her child was assaulted in a soccer game, and it was like, okay, we've gone from teasing to bullying to now assault. And that was their go-to place. And I think for some parents, I think it was just a function in many ways of they haven't seen their kids in these environments. So when they relay a story to them, these are some of their reactions. So we had to do a lot of coaching and definitely being patient with parents in ways that, was necessary. But in that one case about the soccer game, there was a referee. We called a foul, and that's the way we officiate a game. It's not assault. They learn from it, and we go on. But the point is that I think we saw some things that just was evident that this amount of time kids were isolated and weren't in a setting like the ones we provide, day, overnight, etc. There was a kind of a breaking in period, so to speak. I don't know if you noticed that, but I know we definitely noticed that at our camp.
Mm-hmm. I would say I wrote down relearn. So I think the spring lead up was about rethinking everything, and the summer was about relearning, because I can definitely I can relate to that. And I wonder if other listeners can as well, is the relearning. We noticed, especially our really young kids, had to relearn how to be together again. We had to scrap so many of our lesson plans and go back to the basics of, you just need some free play in a designed environment, because you need to relearn how to be together, how to share a space, and not being forced to be far apart, and being, it just was really interesting. I felt like we had to relearn how to do lots of things at camp, but the campers had to relearn
Yeah.
many of those social aspects, like you said. And our staff, I think the staff had to relearn a lot of things as well. So it was a lot of that. And I'm
Yeah.
curious to hear from other camp owners and directors if that was similar, because it sounds like what you're saying was exactly what we experienced too.
Yeah, like as we make our way into the summer now and talking about those things, I just think like there was no doubt, like everyone across the board, what it was about is joyous a first few days of camp that I could ever, I'm an emotional person. And Kelly, I know you well enough, like, and I'm sure it goes for a lot of our friends out there. Like I found myself in the first few days of camp just walking and listening and getting kind of emotional that we're back doing this. And it was, I described this summer in many ways as joy and stress, like joyful, like overwhelmingly joyful. And then the stress was so real because as was with you, we thought we had a lot of good things in place for our operation. And I can only tell you from our experience, and I don't know how many listeners provide transportation if you're a day camp to and from, but we thought we had a great plan for now absorbing 135 more cars to drop off kids in addition to the normal amount of buses we have. But we learned within the first 3 minutes that our vision for that was not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like we had to just turn everything on its head. And I'm curious about whether it's food service or things of that kind, because I know at my overnight camp, we couldn't be in the dining hall. Like we had to do outdoor patio dining, and we created this incredible outdoor patio. Some people did it with umbrella tents and spread over many areas of, picnic tables. Some people did it with big tents. Again, depending on where you were, you could, and how many, seatings for dining you had at your overnight camp. Like, it was incredible the amount of very specific planning we had to do, which I'd like to think for most people just played out exactly the way you wanted it. And I'm sure, like mine, with my my drop off and pickup process, we had to turn it on its head within, 6 hours and make it work. So that was the beginning of my summer. But I just think the summer, just for so many reasons, was incredibly satisfying. And I hope for those of us and all of us on this podcast, and the listeners, this is what we do. So just to be out of it for over a year and to be back was highly emotional, and it was really great. And then after you got over that, you said, "Oh snap! Like, we got to get to work now."
Yeah, it seems like what you're talking about is very paradoxical, like the great paradox. And I was listening to Esther Perel the other day on a podcast. Actually, can start reading books and listening to podcasts again, which is
Yes.
exciting. Yay! But she really talked about that great paradox of being able to straddle two things at once, and that tension in between. And that, to me, like when you said joy and stress at the same time, this summer felt very paradoxical for me, and something I'm working on is being able to straddle two things. They can be both end.
Yep.
But it was like being present in the moment and so happy and grateful that camp was happening, but also having a little bit of that, like, I just need to survive and just need to get through this. So it felt very paradoxical to me of being very happy that camp was happening and being in the moment and enjoying it, but it also felt very much survival and being able to just get us through this summer. Let's be able to do this and make it to the end. And so I wonder if that can resonate with other camp owners and directors of both end, very on both extremes of the sides of how camp was. And it sounds like to me, just having a COVID survivor boot camp class happening, that probably was how that was for people. Like you said, of very happy parents, but then when they were unhappy, it was intense. So I think it was a both end, not so much polarity, but a paradox of both for those in the camp industry this summer.
Yeah, and I think that the reality of settling into, like, all these systems were in place to, using the phrase which wasn't realistic, keeping COVID out, so to speak. Like, we put all these systems in place to do that. And I think it seems industry wide that there were very, very limited, exposures, et cetera, that didn't have any long-term effects in terms of messing up summers for people. I know up here in Ontario, we did remarkably well. We happen to have up here a very high adult population double vaccination rate right now. Up here currently, all eligible adults, there's over 80% of our adult population is double vaccinated. So, and when the summer happened, I think that, it was really moving along the right way, and played into our favor as people settled in. And I think for day camp people, and maybe Andy and the crew will talk a little bit about this in their show, but I know, just speaking very briefly, there was such an emphasis on social responsibility in the day camp world, right? We needed to lean on not only our families, but our staff to recognize that they're coming back and forth every day. And especially in an environment where there isn't a child vaccine and we're not always together and being responsible. I think some of the hardest conversations we ended up having were with families who maybe pushed back a bit when they went to their cottage on the weekend and came back and there was a sniffle and we had to send them out for tests. And that meant that the siblings had to go too. And I would say the vast majority of families were very proactive and said, hey, I'm just going to do this to be safe, but others weren't. And that was some of our battles during the summer. And I'm curious, as well, as we have some conversations either on the show or privately about, the struggle with that. At the end of the day, we just took, it was very easy for us because these weren't our choices. These were choices these were directives. We had to do this. But we navigated those the best way we could. I just think programmatically, and I'm curious, Kelly, we heard in 2020 that camp was successful for those who did operate because they really went back to basics. The need for this activity to happen and not this because of COVID. Like, I know for many of us, in 2021, we made similar decisions. Did you find that any of the programmatic or operational changes or shifts that you made impacted how people felt about camp? Was it still, we're just happy to be here? Or I'm just curious because I know a lot of us had to just change up a lot of the ways we did things, and just wondering how it resonated with your clientele.
Yeah, I think it was very similar for us of compared to the camps that ran in 2020 of we didn't do any overnights and in tenting but we did late nights. And so I think people were just happy to have camp. And when we did the extra effort to adapt things like that, they were just happy to have it. So I think, of course, there are things that were missed and we didn't do a lot of the extra things that we typically do. And I think as the camp owner director, you feel like, oh gosh, part of you wants to have that for the kids, right? Like part of me, I hated that we couldn't do some of those extra offsite trips or overnights in tents that we would normally do. But I also was just, it was nice to not have that pressure also to have to do them and okay with the adaption. So I really didn't hear much of that. It was more just, yeah, great. Anything that you're willing to do is super. And so there wasn't as much, or there wasn't really any of complaining about not having some of those things. I don't know how that was for you, but yeah, for me, I noticed that it was just great. Whatever you can do is good with us and we'll take it.
Yeah, we had a very similar experience, due to various rules around cohorting and stuff. I mean, our swim program had to change a little bit. We had to be much more intentional about capacities in pools. And, we made some strategic decisions around different programs, et cetera. But, since this is a camp owners podcast, I mean, at the end of the day, we're the people who have made the personal promises in many ways to our clients, right? So I can see how we would always feel like, are we delivering what we say we're going to deliver, pandemic or no pandemic? And I think that was a constant, I think constantly it was on my mind, hoping that, this is what, people felt good about. I know from a business point of view, not having those programs or operating with certain elements that our facility provided freed up cash flow that allowed us to deal with all the necessary COVID precautions. So financially, camp like ours, which was dealing with about 15% or 20% of the typical capacity, we needed to think about, boy, I had to buy more, I had to rent more tents at camp for shelter. I'm on a country property and we had to have more access to washing stations, and we had to invest in rental of washing stations and things of that kind. So, there were all these considerations, which, I think we all had to give about what we reluctantly had to give up so we could do the other things that would keep everyone safe or keep the door open every day, et cetera. I'm curious, the plug to the day camp podcast for sure. Everyone talked about weather too. Like weather was all over the place during the summer. I don't know what it was like in Minnesota, but up here in Toronto, we went from lots of rain and then high humidity and super heat and, couldn't necessarily get the kids in the pool as often as we'd like to, and finding different ways to do that. So those were some added challenges. When you're operating the way you typically can, you can sort of navigate switching things on a dime or getting all the kids, going. I have to just tell you, everybody, just a really quick story. I remember, talking to day camp friends who operated in 2020 who, had these, rain days, right? Where we're an outdoor site, we have shelter safely for so many people, but if it rains hard and it's going to rain all day, we're just not going to have camp. And I remember there was one day very early in the summer where it rained for like hours, and we had our kids in their cohorts in these spaces that they only could do, but it was so limited in what we could provide them in terms of program and activity that there was this moment in time where I was on the phone with the bus company saying, can we get the buses an hour and a half early? Can we get this email going? And then we brought in, and we're having this conversation. And then my associate director came in and just said, we can survive for another hour and a half. We're okay. Like, I just remember that being a moment where it was like, oh my gosh, these kids are going to go home and say that they were, in this room all day. But COVID and the rain didn't allow us to do some of the things that would allow us in any other year to deliver what we deliver on rainy days. It was just really, really, especially when you couldn't sing inside, you couldn't like do any of that stuff. So that one just came to mind. I don't know if people can relate to that, but boy, the weather gave us a hard time at different moments in the summer.
Weather is always stressful every year. Like at the last day of camp, I'm always thinking, I don't care if it has a monsoon tomorrow in Minnesota. Whatever it is, I don't care. And I'm going to love it because it is not my problem anymore. But weather, yeah, for overnight day camp, all of it, we needed to be outside as much as possible. So when we couldn't be outside, it was an added stressor for sure, for
Mhm.
sure. But like you said, with those outdoor shelters or more outdoor spaces wherever you did it. I think those are some of those things of, ooh, I really liked that every single group, every cohort had a covered area. So yeah, and we will do that going forward. So I think that, kind of leads into how we don't have to get to the nitty-gritty, but what are there any reflections from the summer that you are thinking it really forced me to do that and I'm going to keep going forward with that, or it really forced me to rethink and this is how I will do this for the future?
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that. We did an activity with our leadership team in the last couple days of camp. Um, our daughter Jordana, who has now joined us full time on our team, which I'm proud to share, which is really great. Third generation of director, just a personal, exciting moment for our family and our business. But she carried our team through an exercise where we played a game called "Do You Remember?" You know how the course of a summer, just so many things happen that you either, God bless anybody who writes these things down on a regular basis, because I just don't. But going through an exercise of like, do you remember? And then like randomly writing on the backside of a card, the things that we surely forgot that we did this or this happened or whatever, and then having a discussion of how did that impact future decisions, or how we may want to put that in the classic Google Doc for next year's planning or whatever. So we played this game, and it was, first of all, it was absolutely hilarious, but it also, created an opportunity for us to really reflect on things that we were challenged with, or we celebrated things we did, not knowing how they would turn out. But specifically to the question, Kelly, I have been throughout, being a camp director, I'm a big guy on staff morale. This has been such a feature of what I love about this work and my connection to my staff, and making sure that on a daily basis, they're saying to themselves, I made a good choice. I had a lot of other options for work this summer, but coming to work here every day is really filling my bucket, kind of thing. And I think that over the years, we've done a very good job of that. But it was never more in your face than this summer as to how much we need to appreciate our staff. And I had the good fortune of being both in a day camp and an overnight camp setting throughout the summer. And so, after 2 weeks of overnight camp, we were vigilant as was required and as we needed to be. But when I went up to my overnight camp, like the feeling of COVID, and as restrictions lessened, and as the quote imperfect bubble became more safe, and our testing sort of revealed that we could be together in spaces more, that feeling was amazing, and our staff did awesome. And in fact, I'm so proud of the way, and I'm sure many of you dealt with days off at overnight camp, and the way, I'm particularly proud of the way my camp dealt with overnight staff and days off, and proud of that. But at day camp, they had to wear masks every day, our staff. At points they had to wear shields. There was a point in the first 10 days of the summer where public health mandated that my counselors wear goggles and masks. Can you imagine?
Oh my.
And so our level of demonstrating appreciation, we needed to ramp it up. And so, and I don't know if other people have done this, but we use the Oprah analogy of you get a car, you get a car, you get a TV or whatever. And we did this thing at camp called 5 weeks of Howie and staff giveaways. And it was just little stuff, but we made a big deal about it. And I just wanted to be very intentional about appreciation in all ways. It could be a gift card. It could be a gift card one week. It could be opening the site safely on the weekend so they can use the pool as comfortably as they wanted, or going all out at the staff banquet safely. Like, there were just things that we knew we needed to do, because in many ways our counseling staff and the staff in general were the heroes of the summer, because they were asked in some cases, and again depending on your jurisdiction, to just really work hard and follow these measures, which were so necessary to keep campers and themselves safe. So for me, it was all about staff morale, silver lining, lots of good ideas, etc. And we discovered the value of weekly Zoom staff meetings instead of keeping staff. And we felt we harnessed sort of an approach that seemed to get full attendance and engagement. So I think those are some things. Sari, my wife, will call it the silver linings of the summer. I'm sure all of us on listening have your own silver linings. Those were just some of ours.
Mm-hmm. I love that idea for that game. I think at our leadership retreat, and we're going to do that. Do you remember? Because you always do that. You think we need to write this down. So we're going to play Do You Remember? I think that sounds amazing, because everyone remembers different things, and then you can giggle and reflect. And I like that. I would say for me, my biggest reflection, which will lead into topics for future episodes, is for me this summer, there was two different things at work. I think there was the constant COVID domino of the planning was pushed back, the hiring was pushed back, which meant the planning and training, it felt like a constant just trying to keep up. And the COVID domino just really, really delayed that. And the other part at work for me was reflecting on, I need to reorg. I need to do a major reorg of my leadership team in a good way. We've grown, and I didn't get to play this summer as much, Howie. I did not have as much fun. And that was hard. And so I think for me, what it highlights is that reflection of, so a silver lining in a good way, it's pushing me like that. Sometimes those things force your hand, and I've been thinking about it for a while, but I need to do a reorg, which is exciting, of my leadership team. And I need to have another entry level leadership tier for me to bring in those 3-4 year staff, something that they can grow into and look and want to work towards and have. And I need to shift myself into more of that CEO role, and then have my executive team, or however that is. So that's a whole nother topic that I would love to explore. But that reflection for me on the summer is that's my biggest one, is it came to light that I need more levels of leadership so that I can be more overarching and I can have more fun, because I felt like it was a constant catch up this summer, and just I'm too much in the day to day. And I need to step out of that. I mean, I still need to be in it, but I need more. I need more levels of leadership in my team. So that's one of my biggest. That's not so much a silver lining, but it's also what this summer taught me reflection for me.
I can totally identify with that, because actually, Kelly, we're doing a very similar exercise right now. Now that Jordan has come on full time, there's a real opportunity for us to look at a layer of leadership of some really key leaders who can now pass on their mentorship to another generation, let's call it, of leaders, and be mentors to them, which takes takes pressure off everybody above that in terms of the visual. But I can totally, I mean, we have so many similarities in terms of our style of day-to-day operations. Like wanting to be engaged with campers and staff is still something that, keeps us loving what we do. And we have to have moments in our careers where we can really take stock of whether that's happening or what steps we need to take to still, having the passion for what we do the way we've traditionally had it. So yeah, good for you. I look forward to sharing notes on that with you, and would be a very good topic, I think, to address on how people go about creating that new layer of leadership, or maybe communicating it to the team. That would be a good topic. I think we've got lots of topics that we can definitely throw in over the course of the year. I know that we've always wanted to do something on succession, and I know that we're sort of dealing with generational leadership at camp, and we should talk about that. I know that you and I have also talked about partners and spouse relationships and operation of camp and all that stuff, and we have an opportunity maybe to get even more vulnerable and bring our own people into that too. Who knows, Kelly?
Da da da.
Hey, we're all about getting vulnerable on this show.
We are.
And then, but there are also some really cool marketing things we should be talking about. I just want to share that. I don't know how everybody's feeling, but in some kind of warped, very, way, like the pandemic has been the best marketing for our industry that we could never buy. And as much as it pains me to say that, with all the suffering and with all the challenges that everyone has felt, like if you've started registration for 2022 or just on the cusp of it, I can just share with you and the group and the listeners that, we've launched both at overnight and day camp registration for 2022. And it's been overwhelming. I mean, the impact of the experience and coming back has put camp in a light that we always hoped for. And I think people are very eager and see camp in the light that we always knew, but they couldn't figure out, or we had struggled to tell them how. And somehow just sending their kids to camp overnight or day and then coming back, I think it's in, I don't know, has it sealed the deal of why camp is so important? In some ways, yes.
Mm-hmm. I heard someone say early on in my camp career that it's almost like one or the other, is when we're not hurting for campers, but really trying to generate interest in campers and marketing, that it's easier to get staff. And then now, to me, it feels like the list of topics that I have are really staff focused, that the campership is there, that we are on that other side. So I have very similar lists of staffing is a big one, reorg and restructure. I have mental health on my list of things I'd like to talk about. I also have salaries and benefits. It's that time. I think camps really have to look at what our salaries are and what are those benefits, whether they're financial benefits or really highlighting for staff the other bennies that they get by working at camp. I have the succession and generational leadership on there too. But I think what I'm really just the pulse in the industry right now is it's all about staff. And how are we going to get ahead for 2022? So those are those lists of topics. And if there's listeners that other topics that they'd like to address, I'd love to hear that too. But I'm excited to talk about some of these things, Howie, and taking advantage of this time of year where we can put some energy and thought into those.
Yeah, I'm with you. Totally with you. Wow, there's so much we've unpacked here, Kelly. It's really, and there's so much more. And I think that having guests in future episodes share their ideas will be really great. I'm really happy that we're back in the saddle, as you started the show with. We are not only the beneficiaries of one amazing sponsor for the Camp Owners Podcast, but we've got two, and we welcome back Camptivities. Our friend Ryan Rosen in California is back on board with the Camp Owners Podcast and his amazing team. Folks, scheduling is hard. It's easy to make mistakes, and it affects every camper's summer. It's time for it to be easier. Let Camptivities help you create a balanced and engaging schedule without the mistakes, in less time than you ever imagined. Camptivities does it all for day and resident camps. You want auto scheduling, you want staff scheduling, camp and group scheduling, hey, rainy day scheduling, and so much more. If you're looking for a better way to schedule this summer, you got to talk to our friends at Camptivities. I've been on board with Camptivities for the last 3 to 4 years, and particularly this year with so many changes to groups and group sizes and all the things that we had to navigate. Boy, it was wonderful. So please check them out. I know they'd love to show you what they're calling the next big thing in camp. Visit camptivities.com to set up a time to chat. And as they say, let us help you get away from your desk and back out to camp. Sort of your sentiment too, Kelly, in your rearg, eh? A little bit.
That's right. Kelly needs to do a little bit more fun. So I'll
So
take some
check out
help with those
Camptivities.
activities, Brian.
Yeah.
Great. So Howie, you know what? We really haven't done the two of us just alone in a solo episode for a long time, but we are still going to do our usuals here and be consistent. And we're going to end with something inspiring us. So let's end with, is it going to be a book, article, podcast, something that's inspiring you right now as a camp professional? So Howie, do you want to go first? Do you have what's inspiring you?
Yeah, but it's just like so many, and we talked about this before we got on the show. Just been so hard to listen to podcasts and read books and do those things over the last several months, and just starting to get back into it. But I have found, like so many, my Instagram feed has been a source, in some aspects, inspiration, both silly and informational and inspirational. We mentioned Adam Grant before. Adam Grant has a great Instagram account. There's so many things in that that are daily, just bite-sized leadership, group think kind of messages that are just sort of in the palm of your hand, just things that can help you, I think, shape some of the ways that you formulate staff training or your own organization. So check out Adam Grant's Instagram. That's been the one thing I've been leaning to sort of every morning, just scrolling on the feed and finding what Adam Grant has new every day. So that's my inspiration, Kelly.
All right. Well, mine's is similar vein of Adam Grant. I'm going to read his book, and I have it on loan from the library so that I have to get it done. So that for me is inspiring, of that think again, rethinking. And also in that same vein of Charles Duhigg. I hope I'm saying his name right. He's a journalist for New York Times, but he wrote a book about habits and productivity. And he talks a lot about prioritizing in that to-do list, but do we really do some deep thinking about what's on that to-do list, and is it a priority, and does it change day to day? But about reshaping habits, and his biggest quote in there is about the best productivity app that we can have for free is just that deep thinking about what's really a priority, and should this be our priority? And that can change. So I am in this habits, productivity, rethinking phase right now. So those are the two things that are inspiring me right now.
Amazing. Well, we have a time of year that we can focus on those things. So that's great.
Absolutely. All right. So Howie, if people are looking to get a hold of you, how can they connect with you? What are the modes to reach Howie best?
Yeah, so if anyone, and I invite anyone to reach out, and happy to chat. You can reach me at howie@camprobinhood.ca. Our camp's website is camprobinhood.ca, and you can find me on Instagram at Howie Grossinger. So look forward to connecting. It's season 3, and we're really excited. So reach out, everybody.
Awesome. And my email is Kelly with a Y at hiddenpinesranch.com. Please don't forget that you can find all of our show notes at gocamp.pro/ownerspod. You can find the resources that we mentioned, our inspirations on here, and any other notes that you wanted to recheck. And also on there, you can find other Go Camp Pro podcasts. So Howie, feels good to be back in the saddle. I was actually thinking about wearing a cowboy hat.
Were you?
Yeah, I was like, let's surprise Howie and get campy in a little costume. But anyway, feels good to be back in the saddle with you. I'm excited for the things that we'll talk about, and excited about our future guests and programming.
Same here. Same here. Great to see you, Kelly.
All right. Take care.